So, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. It's Monday. And Mike and I are both together again. We've missed each other. Have you missed me, Mike? Because I missed you. But we're both back in Edinburgh. Both of us have been out and about around the country. Mike was on a tour up the Western Isles, including Skye and the Western Highlands. I was over both in Dumfries and Galloway again, which is a place that I love down the southwest. And I've been over in Kintyre, the Mull of Kintyre, which you probably know from the Wings, from Linda McCartney and Paul McCartney, who made it famous with their song about the Mull of Kintyre. And indeed, when we were walking around the Mull of Kintyre, the mist actually did roll in, so it was really interesting. But we're back in Edinburgh. So we're back in the south side of Edinburgh. We're near the area known as the Meadows. People like to look at their maps. We're in the Meadows, so we're actually still in the university quarter. And we're going to talk a wee bit about the university as well. In fact, we are actually standing here in front of the old Veterinary School. This is known as the Dick Vet, and it was established by William Dick back in 1823. So it was nearly 200 years since the vet school was established here. It's known affectionately as the Royal Dick, not to be confused with Prince Andrew. So we know this as the Royal Dick, the old vet school. I actually did a course in epidemiology in here when I was studying at Edinburgh University myself, so it's a good part of the university. Now, however, it's a great arts centre here. It's called Summer Hall, but the area here is known as Summer Hall itself. But the building is now called Summer Hall, and it's a great facility, a great addition to the arts centres here in Edinburgh, and it's really great for the south side. A wee bit more about the vet school before we move on. They didn't take it. This was built. This building here moved. So the vet school moved here in about 1923, and it used to be on the south side of the city. It moved up here, specifically built as a veterinary school. Now, I want to mention a couple of people who are quite unusual, little factoids for you here. They're quite unusual in terms of their fame. One of the person I want to mention is a guy called John Dunlop, who was an alumni or an alumnus of the vet school himself. Now, although he went on to be a vet, he did make a major discovery. He actually discovered or invented the pneumatic tyre, and he went on to form the Dunlop Rubber Company. I'm sure you've all heard of Dunlop tyres. Well, it was a guy who studied in here, and his name was John Dunlop. There was another pair of brothers back in the 1930s known as Sinclairs, and I don't know if you've read any of the books about George Heriot in terms of the All Creatures Great and Small, and I know it was featured. There was a TV programme back in the 90s and the 80s. I went on for quite a while. I think it's still being re-shown in some of the channels. Well, there were two brothers. Their name was Sinclair, and the Sinclairs were actually the guys that it's based on. So there's a couple of little famous people here who graduated from the school. As I mentioned, it is now changed into an art centre, and it's a wonderful space in here. It's got theatres, it's got a cinema, it's got a cafe, it's got a bar. It's got we'll walk down a little bit and we'll see the tower has been turned into an incubation for new companies that are start-up companies. It's very innovative and a great space. I've been to Cayley's in here, and the old operating theatre has got a balcony that you can actually stand up and look down. So I've actually seen some plays in here. There's so much space in here. If you're interested in gin, there's a gin distillery in here. The brand is known as Pickering, so it's Pickering's gin, is created in here in a little distillery, and there's also a microbrewery. As I said, it's a great space for the arts. One of the famous artists here in Scotland is known as Richard DeMarco. Richard DeMarco was helped to found the Edinburgh International Festival, and he has a permanent exhibition in here. And if you're in Edinburgh, it's open to everybody. You can walk around it, you can explore it up and down, you can come and see movies here. I would highly recommend it. It's got a courtyard bar and a lovely little cafe. It's got everything you want in one space. I would highly recommend the art school. Should we make a wee?
Yeah, I'd just like to say hello, guys, and I had a brilliant tour up in Skye and up on the northeast coast of Scotland, and visited Cawdor Castle and Elandonnan Castle and various wonderful beaches over the last week or so, so doing a bit of physical touring. But also I'd like to say that in this summer hall, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, and I do limited edition prints for people. The people who do that are called Giclée, and they're based here in Summerhall as well. Yeah. So it's an amazing building. But it's situated south of the Pentlands now, the new one, isn't it, Joe? They've got a new campus, yeah.
Edinburgh's biosphere has really taken off here. There's a lot of money being invested in research, both in veterinary sciences and all human sciences. And so everything has moved down to the south of the city in an area known as the Bush. And this is the area where they actually cloned Dolly the sheep as well. So again, everything's been sort of centred and it's expanded dramatically. Even when I was a student here at Edinburgh University, there's been such an expansion. The Royal Infirmary has moved to the south of the city as well. So each of these big campuses south of the city have got great big biotechnology companies associated with them as well. There's so much research, both in animal and in human stuff. And J.K. Rowling's, in fact, has got a building named after her because she's donated so much to the research into Alzheimer's here.
Yeah, it's a funny building to get your head around because it's got so many bits which were added on. And looking back at the history, it was talking about the student population outgrew the building very much in different times, and as late as the 1930s, so we're actually adding on to it. So,
in fact, we'll see the tower here, which is now known as the Tech Cube. This was laboratories for research when I was a student here, and as I said, I did some courses in epidemiology here at this part of the university. They've also taken over a disused church at the back here, which they use as a concert space for live music. So I've been to so many Cayleys in here, I've been to New Year parties in here. They also use it as a wedding venue. It's a great asset to the south side of Edinburgh. And just around the corner from here, we've got the Queen's Hall, which is a great live music centre as well. So we're coming over to the area known as the Meadows, and we'll talk a wee bit more about them. But you'll see the gates to Melville Drive, which goes right through the park here. This is a great park, again, for the south side of the city. Very well used by all the citizens and by the students here.
Just going to talk about these gates because they are something that people pass every day sometimes and they don't know the history of them. But we had the Nelson publishers of books who were quite a well-known company, and in the 19th century their printing works burnt down, and as a thank you to the town council who had bailed them out, they gifted these amazing ornamental gates. So you've got the unicorn of Scotland on the left hand side and you've got the lion of England on the right hand side.
Yep. Now the Meadows itself, it used to be a loch, L-O-C-H, which you now know is Scottish for a lake. It was known as the Butterlock or the South Loch or Southern Loch. It was a very shallow loch, and it was used for the water supply for the city. It was also used for there was a brewery here. It was used by people who were bringing the animals in to the city to be sold at the marketplace, but it was also a source of disease. So back in the 1600s, when they started to pipe fresh water from Comiston, which is just on the Pentland Hills, they started to pipe fresh water into the city. And there was a gentleman who was on the council called Thomas Hope, who came up with the idea of actually draining or starting to drain this and turn it into some sort of pleasure gardens. So at the end of the 1700s, they did start to drain the swamp, as it were. And back in the early 1800s, there was an Act of Parliament passed where this became owned by the people, so nobody is allowed to build on the Meadows. And it's a wonderful space for the city. It used to be known as Hope Park as well.
Just taking a distance view, Joe, of the Summer Hall, because I think we were quite near it, but just to show it a wee bit.
Beautiful building.
Yeah.
As I said, built in the early 20th century, the old building, and of course the new tower back in the 1960s.
I'd just like to say something about the exhibition. There's a great Edinburgh International exhibition of industry and also artwork and science here. And in 1886, that was a time the Victorians loved to have these exhibitions to showcase the new industrial age, and there was much in the way of steam-powered mechanical things, items on show, as well as, they had houses even as well, and printing presses. And there are items scattered around Edinburgh today which were in that great international exhibition of 1886, including the brass founders column on Nicholson Square.
Yep, we've covered that before.
We covered that, and also the cannon. I didn't know this, but one of the cannons on Carlton Hill was actually here as well on exhibit, and of course the Doulton tiles in the Café Royal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yep. And nowadays, if you come here on a weekend, you'll see various sports being played here. So you'll get football, you'll get volleyball, there's cricket that's played here, softball is played here. You also get archery here. And we're going to talk a wee bit more about archery in a little while, because we have the Royal Company of Archers who are based here in the south of the city. Now it's a wee bit showery here, and we are expecting to have some rain, so I've got my umbrella handy just to pop up anytime. Now we did mention...
Joe, there was also, for football fans, 1875,
the Hibs and Hearts
derby between Hearts and Hibs. The first football derby was held here in the Meadows between the two local teams.
The two big teams in Edinburgh known as Heart and Midlothian and Hibernian. Now Hibernian used to be a teetotal team, did you know that?
I didn't know that.
And they used the local school to get changed in, whereas Hearts weren't teetotal, and they used a pub to get changed in for the first local derby between the two teams. We're going to take a wee walk. We're going to end up at Edinburgh University, one of the campuses at Edinburgh University. We're just taking you back to the back of some of the buildings here. Now I mentioned John Hope, who designed the Meadows here himself, has started to design it, and this was his summer house he built here. So this little building here was John Hope's house.
A hidden gem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people pass that and have no idea
all the time
the history of that. Yeah.
Yep.
And he put drainage in, didn't he? And he also put pathways, and lots of the areas around about are called after him. You've got Hope Park
Terrace
just back up there as well. Yeah.
Yep. This whole area was known as Hope Park as well, so it was nicknamed as Hope Park before it became known as the Meadows. Now, right next to John Hope's house here, we had a brewery, and this is the brewery building here, which is now converted into apartments and some office space, and we'll have a little look at that. You just got to be careful here, Mike, because there is a cycle lane and a pedestrian lane, and the cyclists get really upset if you're walking in the cycle lane, and we will get dogs abuse from these cyclists.
And we've got to watch that we don't hog the pedestrian lane and then get people moving over into the cycle lane and getting run over. So we've got to watch that as well.
Now, we mentioned some of the sports. We've got the tennis courts over here. This is where Edinburgh University Tennis Society uses this little playfield here. So it's one of the sports. I'm going to put my brolly up, Mike.
We're getting the rain now.
Yeah. They did say expect some thunder and lightning as well, so...
Unusual, isn't it, in Edinburgh?
What, rain?
Of course. And of course, as Blue Badge guys, we're like superheroes. Nothing will stop us.
Nope. Absolutely.
You've probably seen that looking at some of our previous videos.
Of course, I was away when you took a tour from two of our other viewers who came up from down south as well. So a big hello to them. It's great that people are coming up.
I know. That was Joe and Lizzie who were viewers, and they hired me to take them around. And I was the one that was available. Joe was doing something else. And so either of us are very happy to guide you folks if you're coming across for a physical tour.
And it's great that the tours are coming. Both Mike and I are going to be working together. There's an organisation coming over from North America, from the United States, and they're bringing over their top performers. And Mike and I have been asked very kindly by a company called Spectra. We're going to give Spectra a big shout out here, based in Edinburgh and down south. So hi to the guys from Spectra if you're watching, and thanks for considering both Mike and I for the project that's going to take place later on this month as well. I'm just showing you stopping here because this is the area where the Butterlock Brewery, this is the gateway to the brewery here, and we'll walk around a bit and you'll get a good view at how the brewery has been changed into apartments as well and into office space. You get a much better view on this side up here, but have a look at how you got the ancient buildings here.
You can see that stone, eh? It's like found stone rather than being carved and smoothed over. It's just like how they found it.
Roughly hewn.
Yeah,
I know Thomas Hope himself was part of he was a great improver. He was part of the great improvement movement in the 17th century when they started to improve agriculture and fields here. So his idea of improving this whole area went down very well. Now just look at how we've got the juxtaposition here of the modern. These are student residencies in here, so this is a little campus here for mainly foreign students who are based in this little campus here. This is
actually part of Archers Hall, because Archers Hall, and we're going to have a look at that building, when they were getting some renewal done, and it's an old organisation who are the official bodyguard to the sovereign, and they've been that since the 18th century. They've got a little meeting house, a little private club, and when they were getting it done up, they put some of the money towards improving the students' accommodation, and that's actually what you're seeing here on the lands of Archers Hall, and we're just behind it.
Yep, we're just going to go up there now, but we'll go in here and we'll see the view of the brewery as it was. Hiya, how you doing?
Good. Hiya.
You just finished school?
Yeah,
Did you study hard?
no.
Have you got homework?
Nope.
You've not got any homework? Oh, you got off
Your
light.
school, yeah.
So this is the back of the brewery here. This has all been converted into offices and
it's given the viewer some idea of how the old roads went as well, because they weren't as manicured as they are today. So we have this Beaucluse Street, which we're coming on to, which was part of the old access into Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And the brewery, there was one down at I'm talking about the Flodden Wall was around this area as well. Yeah.
So the whole Southside, because this is just outside the city limits here, the city wall here.
Yeah.
Now we're walking onto Beaucluse Street. Now Beaucluse is a great word to confuse our foreign viewers when they come here for the first time. It's actually spelled, I'm going to try this, Buckleuch. So it looks like it's spelled Butterlock, but it's pronounced Buckleuch. And we'll pick a little bit further up here. Now this here is now it's not signposted, and I find this is really interesting because again people will walk past this building here and never know what it's for.
Yeah, and when we do coach tours, it's usually we fly past this and we can only just say a very small thing about it, but it's the Royal Company of Archers. It's called Archers Hall, and goes back to the 17th century. It's saying that this building really goes back to the 1700s, and when it was extended also in the 19th century and later, you see this lighter honey-coloured stone on the left there. That's the extension, because it was more like a block, like a square, and above the door you've got the coat of arms of the Royal Company of Archers. They had butts, B-U-T-T-S, places where they would fire the arrows, and they would be in the meadows, but also in leaf links too.
Yep.
And this place at one point was a tavern, because the archers, to get money, let it out to be a tavern and also a meeting place, an assembly hall for the locals, for dancers and such like. But also, what does it take to be an archer? You've got to either be retired military and quite high up in the military.
You've also got to be Scottish, or very close association,
associated, or a politician as well, and or one of the nobility. So I've got to say, I probably
disqualified
not going to make it.
Disqualified fight in every
I
count.
think you never know, Joe. You might have something in there.
No, I can guarantee I've got no royal blood in me whatsoever. I was always on the wrong side of the fence. I always say to people when they come to Scotland, they always want to look back at their records and find out if they're related to Mary Queen of Scots or people love their ancestry. I always say in my family it's much easier for us to go to the court records because most of us ended up in jail.
I know. Be careful.
We were always rustling things and stealing things, so we were on the wrong side. So
You never know what you might turn up.
exactly.
And it's had a lot of criticism by architectural critics who don't love it, really, let's say. It's very sort of utilitarian, but it's got a nice entrance hall designed by Rowland Anderson, who did many of the beautiful buildings around Edinburgh, including the Portrait Gallery. And you can see the glass structure on the side there, which is to do with firing their arrows under cover, a practice area as well.
Yeah, and they do actually still practice on the Meadows as well, so if you come here during the week you sometimes see them out there. Now going back to this weekend, we had the Queen and we had Prince Charles who came down from Balmoral. They were actually in Edinburgh, and so the Royal Company would have been there to give her the ceremonial protection, as it were, more than anything else.
Right.
So you do see them, and if you're going to see the Queen when she's doing anything at either the Parliament or up at the St Giles, they form the protection order. The Grand Old Duke of York, she actually walks amongst them as well.
Yeah. So a final view of Archers Hall there. Yeah.
Looks like this little shower is passing through. Again, in this part of Edinburgh, this used to be the Jewish quarter here, Mike.
Yeah.
When I came to study here in Edinburgh, on this street here, we had kosher butchers, kosher bakers, and one of the people that I remember vividly was on a Friday night. There was a woman called Jeannie Veach, and now I don't know if she was Jewish herself or not, but she never opened on a Saturday for some reason, and she made homemade boiled sweets. And every Friday there was always a line of students outside her shop buying all these because she would sell them all off really cheaply. I think she just didn't like working on the weekends. I don't know if she was Jewish, but this certainly was a Jewish quarter here. The synagogue is not very far from here, and also there's a Jewish cemetery in this area. But this area is completely transformed, even from when I was here studying in the 19 blah blah blahs.
Yeah,
the 1970s. Yeah, but again, you've got these buildings here. You've got such an eclectic mixture of architecture, where you get the modern mixed in with the ancient.
But you know, Joe, you look at some of the dates on these buildings on the right hand side, and you see 2000.
Yeah,
because there was a new building, but they built in the old style.
Yeah,
didn't they?
Well, they've got one
that's as old as not that old sometimes.
Yeah. Well, this building here on the right, for example, this is built in 1935. So this is in the 1930s. So this is just pre Second World War.
That's right. Yeah. So what's student accommodation around here, right?
Oh, a lot of it.
It's,
yeah.
Quite affordable.
It's mixed. So you'll get student accommodation and long-time residents, as well as social housing as well. There is social housing.
Yeah.
Just move up a little bit here, and maybe we can. If we get the street sign here, Mike, you'll see how you spell Buccleuch. I missed out a C. It's two C's. Buccleuch. And also, the Duke of Buccleuch, or the Duke of Queensberry, is the Governor General of the Royal Archers, the Royal Company of Archers.
It's all tied in.
Yeah. Now, both Mike and I, when we were studying for our blue badge, this is where we studied in this street here.
This is the time we first met down here, was with our other colleagues as well in Buccleuch Place, where we started getting our lectures on what it took to be a blue badge guide. Yeah. This is very old coming up here, because this is called Causeway, and on the right hand side you see this little blue shop frontage on the right there. Well, just around the corner, it kind of skews away the street, and that's because there was settlements here way back, and certainly during the 18th century as well. And there's a connection with Robert Burns,
Yep.
national poet in the 18th century. And he used to live it up a bit, this
Yep.
part of town, and he met with this lady Clarinda, Agnes McElhose, and they frequented the pub called Lucky Pringle's Tavern. So you can just imagine what it was like back then. So this is West Cross Causeway, and I think that's something from the French. You know the French actually, Joe. It's something to do with Causeway, or meaning road, or made up access or something. So I know there's a link with the French anyway.
I haven't got that one.
See.
Pardon.
Not got that one. I hope I'm not
Je m'excuse,
talking
pardon.
nonsense.
But this area in Scots was known as Goose Dub, which means the goose pond. So, but the goose was spelled G-U-S-E, and the
right.
dub was a pond. So this area was a goose pond as well. You can see the church as well in the corner.
Go in and get a wee look at the Goose
Yep.
Dub. And we're standing in front of this angled street, and that tells us it's quite old, and it doesn't actually conform to the later Buccleuch Street, which we've just walked up. So we see West Cross Causeway, and we have an East Cross Causeway on the other side over towards Nicholson Street. And if you look at the Goose Dub, the old way of spelling goose, G-U-S-E, and that was the goose pond there that Joe was talking about just a minute ago. And Walter Scott refers to that goose pond in writings going back to his youth, which is quite interesting. And a water source existed here for horses as well, going back a bit too. So what I'm going to do before Joe picks up the story is we're going to walk over to this church. This is a churchyard that you probably wouldn't be coming to on a tour of Edinburgh unless you were with either Joe or me, because we're going to take you into some of the more hidden areas that maybe the main tours don't come to. And this one used to have what was called the Chapel of Ease here, and there was some notable burials. We're going to tell you about one in a minute, quite a well-known, notorious character of Edinburgh. Now, some of these cemeteries are left open purposely because for homeless people, and sometimes if you look into some of the mausoleums you can see bits of bedding and things to sustain life. There's no grave to this person as far as we know, but you may have heard of the character called Deacon Brodie, and Joe's referred to the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and in the film Maggie Smith, or Jean Brodie, says that she's of that Brodie family. And the Brodies, Deacon Brodie, was a furniture maker, and we're talking about the 18th century, and we're going back to about 1742 when he was born. And he was quite a top man in Edinburgh. He was a town councillor. He was a member of the council, and today we've still got councillors. They're like local politicians that get elected. But he was also what we call a deacon, and a deacon is affiliated to an organisation called an incorporation, and he was a top man in this incorporation of Wrights and Masons, and he was just a doer, and he was a mover and shaker. He networked, he knew all the right people, and he had a few people behind him helping him, and he was a maker. He used to fit and make locks and maintain locks and security for people's houses. And he had a couple of helpers, a person called Ainsley and another one called Brown and another one called Smith. And this foursome used to go about Edinburgh repairing and also seeing to mechanical objects that existed back in the 18th century, which would have been quite primitive nowadays. But he had a lot of habits that he had to maintain, including at least 2 mistresses, and he had a gambling habit too, which got a bit out of control. There is still a pub, but we think we are perhaps in the more significant place, and I'll tell you later why we think this. And then what happened, they got very ambitious and overly ambitious, and he was stealing things from the university as well. It said he had something to do with stealing the ceremonial mace from the university, and also went on to rob the customs house in the Canongate in Chesil's Court, as it was back then. Now, he thought he got away with that, but some evidence was left behind, and the authorities were able to work on a couple of the accomplices and got them to turn King's evidence on Brodie. And by that time, Brodie had gone over to Amsterdam, and he was over there in the Netherlands, hiding. But the authorities were able to bring him back here, and he tried to evade justice, and it took a while to be able to pin it on him, but they eventually were, with the help of his so-called helpers. He was found guilty, and he was condemned to death, and he was put to the gallows. And he boasted, even when on the gallows about to meet death, how he had improved the gallows to make it much more effective and efficient. There is a story also that he had a steel collar made to go round his neck and a steel tube, and some people say that was going to go down his throat. Who knows? But he had informed the person, the hangman, before the event that he had this steel collar on, and nothing was said, and he was hanged. And as far as we know, he died. And as far as we know, he was buried in an unmarked grave. And we think we are at that spot where Deacon Brodie's remains are, in this corner here, which was the chapel of rest back then. Some say he escaped and was spotted in London afterwards, but I think 99% believe that he met his death that day. So, Deacon Brodie, one of the main characters from Edinburgh's history. Robert Louis Stevenson, the author, had a cabinet that had been made by Deacon Brodie, and today you can see that cabinet, and it is in the Writers' Museum in Lady Stair's house in the old town of Edinburgh. Okay, so we'll continue our tour. This graveyard is also the place close to where a Mrs. Coburn, who wrote a famous tune called The Flowers of the Forest, which is a beautiful tune played on the bagpipe, and usually is to commemorate a funeral or the passing of some tragic event in history. For instance, the World Wars, the First and Second World Wars. Okay, so I'm going to pass the mic back to Joe and see if I can fiddle about. You may not hear me because I think the other mic is in my pocket. I'll have to fiddle with it. So have a nice rest of the tour, and I'll let Joe continue it and wrap up.
So the church that we're actually looking at here was built in the 1700s, and it was a Protestant church, but it's now Greek Orthodox. There we go. So it's also it's known as St Andrew's Greek Orthodox Church. Still actively used. The building has been modified a little bit, or let's just say modernised, because it was a bit of a ruin for quite a while, but it's now been repurposed. I think the last time I had some work done was in 2000. I've never actually been in this church myself, but I would really like to go in. I'd love to see a Greek Orthodox service. I've never seen a Greek Orthodox service. And of course, opposite we have another great church over here, and this is part of the United Free Church. So the Free Church of Scotland broke away from the other Church of Scotland. They're always having schisms, and so they broke away, and during the period known as the Was it the Great Division, Mike? What was it called? They when they split, the churches split. It was disruption, the Great Disruption. Yeah. So we just let these kids get past here, coming off the bus here, let the bus move a wee bit. Now, again, talking of gin, we mentioned that Pickering's gin is made up here at Summerhall. A couple of 100 yards here, we've got Southlock gin. We've got another gin distillery. And gin is very, very popular here in terms of production and also drinking it here in Scotland. The difference between gin distillery and a whiskey distillery, apart from the product, is that whiskey has to be stored in a barrel for at least 3 years and 1 day, whereas gin you can produce and you can sell it almost the next day. So a lot of the whiskey distilleries have actually moved into producing gin as well, because it's a good cash cow product. We're going to take you back into the University Quarter, and we'll get away from the noise. There's a great pub here called the Pear Tree Pub, and again, I believe it was here that the first blending of whiskey took place here at the Pear Tree. So we'll walk into the university itself. The big tower here to my right, the big white one, is known as the Appleton Tower, and it's named after one of the principals here. He was Edward Victor Appleton, who was a physicist, and during the Second World War his research took him into the development of radar, and he won the Nobel Prize. So this is named after Edward Victor Appleton, and it was on the 6th floor of this building that I started here at Edinburgh University, Mike. So many memories of this building here. It has been refurbished a lot since I was here as well, and when we first started here at Edinburgh University, I was studying biological sciences, and one of the things we were given was a dogfish to operate on. Now, that dogfish you kept for weeks, and it was stored in formalin, and that thing bloody stank when you were cutting it up. And if you got it on your clothes, you had to almost burn your clothes, because that stuff just stank. So that was my first year at university. Started up in the 6th floor of the Appleton Tower. So this is one of the main campuses of the Edinburgh University. Edinburgh University was the 4th oldest university in Scotland, which makes it the 6th oldest in the English-speaking world. It's known as the first secular university because previous to that, St Andrews, Aberdeen and Glasgow were established by a papal bull, whereas this one did not. This was after the Reformation, so in the late 1500s, or through the Reformation, and the university was established by a charter locally, so it didn't need anyone from Rome to give permission to start the university. So it was known as a secular university. There's about 35,000 students at this, so it's quite a big university.
I don't know, Joe, when you were here, because you used to have George Watson's Ladies' College, which is actually in George Square, and it's now part of the university. It's back up there. It's a beautiful red sandstone building, because my wife, Linda, happens to be a former pupil of George Watson's Ladies' College. So. And
when I was here, I think that was part of the pharmacology department. But it's all changed now. It's all completely changed.
It's probably not been that for a long time.
Yeah. Now I've got some people quite interested in the university itself, so I've actually got some notes on it.
As we speak, there's actually students in there, and maybe you see behind you. I'm not going to go peering in the window, but you can actually see there's people sitting around the table getting a lecture or doing a workshop. So it's all back, isn't it?
Remember when we were in there, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, we were doing a first aid course in there as well.
Yeah, we did a first aid in there, yeah. Which, I have to say, was very useful because I've actually used it.
Well, we always carry, another thing when we're doing our tours there, we always carry a first aid kit, just to be fully equipped in a rucksack and stuff like that. So
you just never know what's going to happen.
This
other tower here used to be known as the David Hume Tower, named after the great philosopher David Hume, but the university changed its name.
Joe, we've just had a good question here. Yep. Is it still possible for Europeans to come here and study? I think this is a Brexit.
Yes, absolutely. There's still students from all over the world will come and study here. Edinburgh is quite an international university, and so you will see students from all over the world. There's no Nothing stopping anybody from coming here at all. It's completely open, as is the whole of the Scottish education system itself. We're just going to finish a wee bit further along here. I want to take you to the little theatre. When I was here, it's known as the George Square Theatre, but it has changed its name. Relatively recently, it changed its name, and it changed its name, I think, for a very good reason. It's now known as the George Aikman Lecture Theatre. And who was George Aikman? Well, I'm going to do a little shout out for a few people here, because George Aikman studied at high school in Kirkcaldy. Now, Kirkcaldy High School is quite famous. Some people may know Val McDermott, the author Val McDermott. She studied there. Gordon Brown, the ex-Prime Minister, also went to Kirkcaldy High School. And Gordon Brown also studied here at Edinburgh University. And I've got two good friends, so Libby and Debbie, hello there, who studied at Kirkcaldy University as well. I was down in Dumfries and Galloway just last week with Debbie. So I'll give a little shout out for Kirkcaldy High School. Now, George Aikman here, he studied at Edinburgh University as well, came up from Kirkcaldy, and he raised a lot of money. He was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, and he was involved in the politics in Scotland. He was quite heavily involved in the politics, but then he turned his hand over to raising money for charity, and he raised a lot for the motor neuron disease research, and he died thinking about 2013, and so the university did name the lecture theatre here, or as it was known here, it was a theatre. I've seen so many shows in here, in the George Square Theatre as well. Now, I want to give us some little bit plug for Edinburgh University. We'll go into here, we can take our umbrellas down. Now, a lot of the graduates from Edinburgh University went on to establish universities in Australia, in Canada, and in the United States. So I just want to read out a couple of them here. So I'm sure in the United States you've heard of the College of William and Mary, which I think is the second oldest college in the United States. It was founded in 1693, and it was an Edinburgh graduate named James Blair who served as the college's founding president. I think he was there for about 50 years, so it was well established. So that's one there. Columbia University, for example, its medical school was again founded by an Edinburgh medical graduate known as Samuel Bard. So we're talking Ivy League here. In Nova Scotia, there's Dalhousie University, and there was an Edinburgh graduate called George Ramsay, and he was the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia as well, and he opened up the university there, and the school was modelled after Edinburgh University, which means that students could attend regardless of religion or nationality, so it was a very open, as I said, secular university. Dartmouth College, well-known Dartmouth College there in New England, had a School of Medicine, again, founded by Nathan Smith. Nathan Smith also, I believe, founded the medical school at Yale as well, so not only in Dartmouth, but also in Yale. Harvard Medical School, founded by three surgeons, one of whom was Benjamin Waterhouse, and he graduated here from Edinburgh University. My old friends in Montreal, McGill University, I love Montreal, so hello Canada, again was founded by four physicians here, including Andrew Fernando Holmes and John Stevenson. Now, University of Pennsylvania, close link between University of Pennsylvania and Edinburgh University, still to this day. I think there's a good exchange program between the universities there. And that was a guy called John Morgan who established the medical school there. And not forgetting Princeton, which is the Presbyterian University. Its whole academic syllabus and structure was reformed, and it was along the total lines of Edinburgh University and the other universities here in Scotland. Of course, that was John Witherspoon. And I think John Witherspoon actually signed the Declaration of Independence as well. And not to leave out Australia, but the University of Sydney, founded in 1850 by Sir Charles Nicholson, who was also a graduate of the Edinburgh Medical School. So the influence that this school has had, or this university has had, to the English-speaking world has been phenomenal. It is the sixth oldest university in the English-speaking world, fourth oldest in Scotland. And it's interesting to note that in the 1500s, when this was established, Scotland, which had a very small population, had 4 established universities, where England, our big neighbour, only had 2, still only had Oxford and Cambridge. So it's just giving you the idea of the importance of education to Scotland, and also the importance of the education of Scottish education to the rest of the world. So I'm going to sign off here at Edinburgh University, George Square. I'm an alumnus of this university. Mike's also got his postgraduate from here as well. So just have a wee scan around, and we will see you all next week. So thanks again for watching us. Stay tuned. We're working on some real gems to bring to you over the autumn period, and hopefully, if you visit us on YouTube, you can get some other people watching us as well.